All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to another stream of Jane Eyre. I know I'm a little late today. I had a couple of technical difficulties that were going on, so I hope you do kind of give me a little bit of a pass for that. Um, yeah, anyway, yesterday where we left off was we had Jane Eyre. She ended up going to work at a place called Thornfield, and she picked up a position where she's now teaching a young girl named Adele, and she's basically a governess now. So one day she was going out to post a letter, and she came upon this strange man. He wasn't really strange per se, but he had an accident with his horse, and she ended up helping him, and he ended up going on his merry way. However, when she returned back to Thornfield Hall, she realized that the man who fell before her was Mr. Rochester, the guy who owns Thornfield Hall. So she's like mortified because back in the day, decorum was you you were a woman and you didn't really touch men and men didn't touch you. And the thing is, Mr. Rochester touched her shoulder so he could get back on his horse. So it's very scandalous in that sense. I know it doesn't seem like a lot given our present day, but that's kind of how it was back in the day. So we're going to continue on from there and basically pick up to where Jane is going to meet Mr. Rochester formally now. And he's currently being administered by a doctor because he possibly sprained or broke his leg. Not really sure yet what happened, but we're going to find out together. So, that being said, let's sally forth. Chapter 13. Mr. Rochester, it seems, by the surgeon's orders, went to bed early that night, nor did he rise soon the next morning. When he did come down, it was to attend to business. His agent and some of his tenants were arrived, and waiting to speak with him. Adele and I had now to vacate the library. It would be in daily requisition as a reception room for callers. A fire was lit in an apartment upstairs, and there I carried our books and arranged it for the future classroom. I discerned in the course of the morning that Thornfield Hall was a changed place, no longer silent as a church. It echoed every hour or so at the knock of a door, or the clang of a bell, and steps too often traversed the hall, and new voices spoke in different keys below a rill from the outer world was flowing through it. It had a master, and for my part I liked it better. Adele was not easy to teach that day. She could not apply. She kept running to the door and looking over the banisters to see if she could get a glimpse of Mr. Rochester. Then she coined pretexts to go downstairs, and in order, so I was shrewdly suspected, to visit the library, where I knew she was not wanted. Then, when I got a little angry and made her sit still, she continued to talk incessantly of her ami, Monsieur Edward Fairfax de Rochester, as she dubbed him, and to conjecture what presents that he had brought her, for it appears that he had intimated the night before that his luggage came from Millcote. There it would be found amongst it a little box whose contents that she had a particular interest. Et cela doit signifier, she said, que la erreur est les danses, un cadet pour moi et peut-être pour voir aussi mademoiselle. Monsieur épaulé de voix, il demandait le nom de ma gouvernante, et si elle n'était pas une petite personne, elle mince et un peu palais. J'ai dit quoi, car c'est var n'est pas, mademoiselle? I and my pupil had dined as usual in Mrs. Fairfax's parlor. The afternoon was wild and snowy, and we passed it in the schoolroom. At dark, I did allow Adele to put away books and work and to run downstairs, for from the comparative silence below and from the cessation of appeals to the doorbell, I had conjectured that Mr. Rochester was now at liberty. Left alone, I walked to the window, but nothing was to be seen thence. Twilight and snowflakes together thickened the air and hid the very shrubs on the lawn. I let down the curtain and went back to the fireside. In the clear embers I was tracing a view, not unlike a picture that I had remembered to have seen of the castle Hildeburg on the Rhine when Mrs. Fairfax had came in, breaking up by her entrance the fiery mosaic that I had been piecing together, and scattering, too, some heavy, unwelcome thoughts that were the beginning throng on my solitude. Mr. Rochester would be glad if you and your pupil would take tea with him in the drawing-room this evening, she said. He has been much engaged all day that he could not ask to see you before. When is his tea time? I inquired. Oh, at 6 o'clock. He keeps early hours in the country. You had better change your frock now. I will go with you and fasten it. Here is a candle. Is it necessary to change my frock? Yes, and you had better. I always dress for the evening when Mr. Rochester is here. This additional ceremony seemed somewhat stately. However, I repaired to my room, and Mrs. Fairfax's aid replaced my black stuff dress by one of the black silk that I had, the best and the only additional one that I kept, except a light gray one, which in my lowered notions of the toilet I thought too fine to be worn, except on first-rate occasions. Do you want a brooch? Asked Mrs. Fairfax. I had a single little pearl ornament which Miss Temple gave me as a parting keepsake. I put it on and then went downstairs. Unused as I was to strangers, it was rather a trial to appear thus formally summoned in Mr. Rochester's presence. I let Mrs. Fairfax precede me into the dining-room, and kept in her shade as we crossed that apartment, and passing the arch whose curtain was now dropped, entered the elegant recess beyond. 2 wax candles stood lighted on the table, and 2 on the mantelpiece, basking in the light and the heat of the superb fire, laid Pilot, with Adele knelt near him. Half reclined on a couch appeared Mr. Rochester, his foot supported by a cushion. He was looking at Adele and the dog. The fire shone full in his face. I knew my traveler with his broad and jetty eyebrows, his square forehead made squarer by the horizontal sweep of his black hair. I recognized his decisive nose, more remarkable for character than beauty, his full nostrils denoting, I thought, were choler, his grim mouth, chin, and jaw. Yes, all 3 were very grim, and no mistake, his shape now divested a cloak, which I had perceived harmonized in the squareness with his physiognomy. I suppose it was a good figure in the athletic sense of the term. He was broad-chested and thin-flanked, though neither tall nor graceful. Mr. Rochester must have been aware of the entrance of Mrs. Fairfax and myself, but it appeared that he was not in the mood to notice us, for he never lifted his head as we approached. Here is Miss Eyre, sir, said Mrs. Fairfax in her quiet way. He bowed, still not taking his eyes from the group of the dog and the child. Let Miss Eyre be seated, he said, and there was something in the forced, stiff brow, in the impatient yet formal tone, which seemed further to express, what the deuce is it to me whether Miss Eyre be there or not? At this moment I am not disposed to accost her. I sat down quite disembarrassed. A reception of finished politeness would probably have confused me. I could not have returned or repaid it by answering grace and elegance on my part, but harsh caprice had led me no obligation, and on the contrary, a decent, quiet scene under the freak manner gave me the advantage. Besides, the eccentricity of the proceeding was piquant. I felt interested to see how he would go on. He went on as a statue would, that is, he neither spoke nor moved. Mrs. Fairfax seemed to think it necessary that someone should be amiable, and she began to talk, kindly as usual, and as usual rather trite. She condoled with him on the pressure of business that he had all day, on the annoyance that it must have been to him with that painful sprain. Then she commenced his patience and perseverance in going through it with it. "Madame, I would like some tea," was the sole rejoinder that she got. She hastened to ring the bell, and when the tray came, she proceeded to arrange the cups and the spoons, and she did so with assiduous celerity. I and Adele went to the table, but the master did not leave his couch. "Will you hand Mr. Rochester's cup?" said Mrs. Fairfax to me. "Adele might perhaps spill it." I did as requested, and as he took the cup from my hand, Adele, thinking the moment prosperous for making a request in my favor, said, "N'est pas, monsieur, qu'il y a un cadeau pour mademoiselle Eyre dans votre petit coffre?" "Who talks of cadeau?" he said gruffly. "Did you expect a present, Miss Eyre? Are you fond of presents?" He searched my face with eyes that I saw were dark and irate and piercing. "I hardly know, sir. I have little experience of them. They are generally thought as pleasant things." "Generally thought? But what do you think?" "I should be obliged to take time, sir, before I could give you an answer worthy of your acceptance. A present has many faces to it, has it not? And one should consider all before pronouncing it an opinion as to its nature." "Miss Eyre, you are not so unsophisticated as Adele. She remains a cadeau, clamorously so. The moment she sees me, you beat around the bush." "Because I have less confidence in my deserts than Adele has. She can prefer the claim of the old acquaintance, and the right, too, of a custom. For she says that you have always been in the habit of giving her playthings. But I had not been to make out a case should I be puzzled so, since I am a stranger, and I have done nothing to entitle me to the acknowledgment." "Oh, don't fall back over modesty. I have examined Adele, and find that you have taken great pains with her. She is not bright, she has no talents, yet in a short time she has made much improvement." "Sir, you have now given me my cadeau. I am obliged to you. It is the need that teachers most covet, praise of their pupils' progress." Said Mr. Rochester, and he took his tea in silence. "Come to the fire," said the master when the tray was taken away, and Mrs. Fairfax had settled into a corner with her knitting, while Adele was leading me by the hand round the room, showing me the beautiful books and the ornaments on the consoles and the chiffonnieres. We obeyed as in duty bound. Adele wanted to take a seat on my knee, but she was ordered to amuse herself with Pilot. "You have been resident in my house 3 months." "Yes, sir." "And you come from—" "From Lowood School in Shire." "Ah, a charitable concern. How long were you there?" 8 years. 8 years? You must have a tenacious form of life. I thought half the time in such a place would have done up any constitution. No wonder you have rather the look of another world. I marveled where you had got that sort of face. When you came on me in Hay Lane last night, I thought unaccountably of fairy tales, and had half a mind to demand whether you had bewitched my horse. I am not so sure yet. Who are your parents?" "I have none." "Nor ever had, I suppose. Do you remember them?" "No." "I thought not. And so you were waiting for your people when you sat on that stile?" "For whom, sir?" "For the men in green. It was a proper moonlight evening for them. Did I break through one of your rings that you spread on that damned ice on the causeway?" I shook my head. The men in green all forsook England 100 years ago, and I, speaking as seriously as he had done, and not even in Hay Lane or in the fields about could you find a trace of them. I don't think either summer or harvest or winter moon will ever shine on their revels more." Mrs. Fairfax had dropped her knitting, and with raised eyebrows seemed wondering at what sort of talk this was. "Well," resumed Mr. Rochester, "if you disown your parents, then you must have some sort of kinfolk, uncles and aunts, perhaps." No, none that I ever saw. And your home? I have one. Where do your brothers and sisters live? I have no brothers and sisters. Who recommended that you come here? I had advertised, and Mrs. Fairfax answered my advertisement. Yes, said the good lady, who now knew what ground we were upon, and I am daily thankful for the providence that led me to make Miss Eyre, and it has been an invaluable companion to me, and a kind and careful teacher to Adele. Don't trouble yourself to give her a character, returned Mr. Rochester. Eulogiums will not bias me. I shall be judge for myself. She began by felling my horse. Sir, said Mrs. Fairfax, I have to thank her for this sprain. The widow looked bewildered. Miss Eyre, have you ever lived in a town? No, sir. Have you seen much of society? None but the pupils and teachers of Lowood, and now the inmates of Thornfield Hall. Have you read much? Only such books as came in my way, and they have not been numerous or very learned. You have lived the life of a nun, no doubt. You are well drilled in religious forms, and Brocklehurst, whom I understand directs Lowood, is a parson, is he not? Yes, sir. And you girls probably worshipped him, a convent full of Regalies, who would worship their own director. Oh, no. You are very cool. No. What? A novice. Not worship her priest. That sounds blasphemous. I disliked Mr. Brocklehurst, and I was not alone in that feeling. He is a harsh man, and once pompous and meddling. He had cut off our hair, and for the economy's sake bought us all bad needles and thread, which we could hardly sew with. That was very false economy. And was that the head and front of his offending, though? Demanded Mr. Rochester. Well, he starved us, and then he had sole superintendence of the provision department, before the committee was then appointed. And he bored us with long lectures once a week, and with evening readings from books of his own inditing, about sudden deaths and judgments which made us afraid to go to bed. What age were you when you went to Lowood? About 10. And you stayed there 8 years? You are now, then, 18, I assume. I assented. Arithmetic, you see, is useful. Without its aid, I should hardly have been able to guess your age. It is a point difficult to fix where the features and the countenance are so much at variance as your cause. And now, what did you learn at Lowood? Can you play? A little. Of course. That is the established answer. Go into the library. I mean, if you please. Go, then, into the library and take a candle with you. Leave the door open, sit down to the piano, and play me a tune. I departed, obeying his directions. Enough, he called out in a few minutes. You play a little, I see, like any other English schoolgirl, perhaps rather better than some, but not well. I closed the piano and returned to Mr. Rochester, and he continued. Adele showed me some of your sketches this morning, which she said were yours. I don't know whether they are entirely of your doing. Probably a master aided you. No, indeed, I interjected. Ah, that pricks the pride. Well, fetch me your portfolio, if you can vouch for your contents being original, but don't pass your word unless you are certain. I can recognize patchwork. Then I will say nothing, and you shall judge for yourself, sir. I brought the portfolio from the library. Approach the table, he said, and I wheeled it to his couch. Adele and Mrs. Fairfax drew near to see the pictures. No crowding, said Mr. Rochester. Take the drawings from my hand as I finish with them, but don't push your faces up to mine. He deliberately scrutinized each sketch and painting. 3 he laid aside. The others, when he examined them, he swept from him. "Take them off to the other table, Mrs. Fairfax," he said, "and look at them with Adele there. You, resume your seat and answer my questions. I perceive those pictures were done by one hand. Was that your hand?" he said to me. "Yes." "And then, did you find time to do them? They have taken much time and some thought." "I did them in the last 2 vacations that I spent at Lowood, and when I had no other occupation." "Where did you get your copies?" "Out of my head." "That head that I now see on your shoulders?" "Yes, sir." "Has it other furniture, or the same kind within?" "I should think that it may have. I should hope better." He spread the pictures before him and again surveyed them alternately. While he was so occupied, I will tell you, reader, what they are. The first, I must premise, that they are nothing wonderful. The subjects had indeed risen vividly on my mind, as I saw them with the spiritual eye before I attempted to embody them. They were striking, but my hand could not second my fancy. In each case it had wrought out but a pale portrait of the thing that I had conceived. These pictures were in watercolors. The first represented clouds low and livid, rolling over a swollen sea. All the distance was in the eclipse. So, too, was the foreground, or rather, the nearest billows, for there was no land. One gleam of light lifted into a relief of half-submerged mast, on which sat a cormorant, dark and large, with wings flecked with foam. Its beak beheld a gold bracelet set with gems that I had touched with just as brilliant a tints as my palette could yield, and as glittering distinctness as my pencil could impart. Sinking below the bird and the mast lay a drowned corpse glanced through the green water. A fair arm was the only limb clearly visible, whence the bracelet had been washed or torn. The second picture contained foreground, only the dim peak of a hill with grass and some leaves, slanting as if by a breeze. Beyond and above spread an expanse of dark blue as twilight. Rising into the sky was a woman's shape to bust, portrayed in its tint. On the neck lay a pale reflection like a moonlight. The same faint luster touched the train of thin clouds from which rose and bowed this version of the evening star. The third showed the pinnacle of an iceberg piercing a polar winter sky. A muster of northern lights reared their dim lances, close serried along the horizon. Throwing these into the distance rose in the foreground a head, a colossal head, that inclined towards the iceberg and resting against it. There were 2 hands joined under the forehead, and supporting it, it drew up before the lower features a sable veil, a brow quite bloodless, white as bone, and an eye hollow and fixed, blank of meaning, but for the glassiness of despair alone were visible. Above the temples, amidst wreathed turban folds of black drapery, vague in its character and consistency as cloud, gleamed a ring of white flame gemmed with sparkles of a more lurid tinge. This pale crescent was the likeness of a kingly crown, and what it diademed was the shape which shape had none. "Were you happy when you painted these?" asked Mr. Rochester presently. "I was absorbed, sir. Yes, I was happy to paint them. In short, I was more to enjoy one of the keenest pleasures that I have ever known." "That is not saying much. Your pleasures, by your own account, have been few. But I dare say that you did exist in a kind of artist's dreamland while you bent and arranged these strange tints. Did you sit at them long each day?" "I had nothing else to do, because that was the vacation, and I sat at them from morning till noon, and from noon till night. The length of the midsummer day favors my inclination to apply." And you felt very self-satisfied with the result of your ardent labors? Far from it. I was tormented by the contrast between my idea and my handiwork, and in each case I had imagined something which I was quite powerless to realize. Not quite. You have secured the shadow of your thought, but no more, probably. You had not thought enough of the artist's skill and the science to give it full being. Yet the drawings are, for a schoolgirl, peculiar. As to the thoughts, they are elfish. These eyes in the evening star, you must have seen them in a dream. How could you make them look so clear and yet not at all brilliant? For the planet above the quells, their rays. And what meaning is that in their solemn depth? And who taught you to paint wind? There is a high gale in the sky, and on the hilltop. Where did you see Latmos? And for that, Latmos. There, put the drawings away. I had scarce tied the strings of the portfolio when, looking at his watch, he abruptly said, "It is 9 o'clock. What are you about, Miss Eyre, to let Adele sit up so long? Take her to bed." Adele went to kiss him before quitting the room. He endured the caress, but scarcely seemed to relish it more than Pilate would have done, nor so much. "I wish you all good night now," he said, making a movement of the hand towards the door, in token that he was tired of our company, and wished to dismiss us. Mrs. Fairfax folded up her knitting. I took my portfolio. We curtsied to him, and received a frigid brow in return, and so withdrew. "You said Mr. Rochester was not strikingly peculiar, Mrs. Fairfax," I observed when I rejoined her in her room, after putting Adele to bed. "Well, is he?" "I think so. He is very well changed and very abrupt." "True. No doubt he may appear so to a stranger, but I am so unaccustomed to this manner that I could never think of it." "And why is he like this, Mrs. Fairfax?" "Partly because it is his nature, and we can none of us help our nature, and partly because he is painful thoughts, no doubt, to harass him and make spirits unequal." "About what?" "Oh, family troubles for one thing. But he has no family." "Not now, but he has had, or at least relatives. He did lose his elder brother a few years since." "His elder brother?" "Yes. The present Mr. Rochester has not been very long in possession of the property. Only about 9 years." "9 years is a tolerable time. Was he so very fond of his brother as to still be inconsolable for his loss?" "Why, no, perhaps not. I believe that there were some misunderstandings between them. Mr. Rowland Rochester was not quite just to Mr. Edward, and perhaps he prejudiced his father against him, and the old gentleman was fond of money, and anxious to keep the family estate together. He did not like to diminish the property by division, and yet he was an anxious man about, and that Edward should also have some wealth too, to keep up the consequence of the name. And soon after he was of age, some steps were taken that were not quite fair, and made a great deal of mischief. Old Mr. Rochester and Mr. Rowland combined to bring Mr. Edward into what he considered a painful position for the sake of making his fortune. What the precise nature of that position was, I never quite clearly knew, but his spirit could not brook what he had to suffer in it. He is not a very forgiving man. He had broke with his family, and now for many years he had led an unsettled kind of life, and I don't think that he has ever been resident at Thornfield for a fortnight together since the death of his brother, without, a will left him master of the house. And indeed, no wonder he shuns the old place." "Why should he shun it?" "Perhaps he thinks it's gloomy." The answer was evasive. I should have liked something more clearer, but Mrs. Fairfax either could not or would not give me more explicit information of the origin and nature of Mr. Rochester's trials. She averred that they were a mystery to herself, and that what she knew was chiefly from conjecture. It was evident, and indeed, that she wished me to drop the subject, which I did accordingly. Chapter 14. For several subsequent days I saw little of Mr. Rochester. In the mornings he seemed much engaged with business, and in the afternoon gentlemen from Millcote or the neighborhood called, and sometimes stayed to dine with him. When his sprain was well enough to admit horse exercise, he rode out a good deal, probably to return these visits, as he generally did not come back until late at night. During this interval even Adele was seldom sent for his presence, and in all my acquaintance with him was confined to an occasional rencontre in the hall or on the stairs or in the gallery, when he would sometimes pass me haughtily and coldly, just acknowledging my presence by a distant nod or a cool glance, and sometimes he would bow and smile like a gentleman, with such affability. His changes of mood did not offend me, because I saw that I had nothing to do with their alteration. The ebb and flow depended on the cause, quite disconnected from me. One day, when he had company to dinner, and had sent for my portfolio, in order, doubtless, to exhibit its contents, the gentleman went away early to attend some public meeting at Millcote, and, as Mrs. Fairfax informed me, but the night being wet and inclement, Mr. Rochester did not accompany them. Soon they were gone, and he rang the bell. A message came that I and Adele were to go downstairs. I brushed Adele's hair and made her neat, and having ascertained that I was myself in my usual Quaker trim, where there was nothing to retouch, all being too close and plain and braided locks included, to admit some of the disarrangement, we descended, Adele wondering whether the petit confrère was at length to come, for owing to some mistake its arrival had hitherto been delayed. She had been gratified. There it stood, a little carton on the table, when we entered the dining-room. She appeared to know it by instinct. "Oh, mon bon oh, mon bon," she exclaimed, running towards it. "Yes, there's your bolti at last. Take it to a corner, you genuine daughter of Paris, and you amuse yourself with disemboweling it," said the deep and rather sarcastic voice of Mr. Rochester, proceeding from the depths of an immense easy-chair at the fireside. "And mind," he continued, "don't bother me with any details of the anatomical process or any notice of the condition of the entrails. Let your operation be conducted in silence. Tenez-toi tranquille, enfant. Comprends-tu?" Adele seemed scarcely to need the warning. She had already retired to a sofa with her treasure, and was busy untying the cord which had secured the lid. Having removed this impediment and lifted certain silvery envelopes of tissue paper, she examined, and then exclaimed, "Oh, c'est que c'est beau!" and then remained absorbed in the ecstatic contemplation. "Is Miss Eyre there now?" demanded the master, half rising from his seat to look around to the door, near which I still stood. "Ah, well, come forward and be seated here." He drew a chair near his own. "I am not fond of the prattle of children," he continued. "For old bachelor as I am, I have no pleasant associations connected with their lisp. It would be intolerable for me to pass a whole evening tete-a-tete with a brat. Don't draw that chair farther off, Miss Eyre. Sit down exactly where I placed it, if you please, that is. Confound these civilities. I continually forget them, nor do I particularly affect simple-minded old ladies. By the by, I must have mine in mind. It wouldn't do to neglect her. She is a Fairfax, or wed to one, and blood is said to be thicker than water." He rang and dispatched an invitation to Mrs. Fairfax, who soon arrived with knitting basket in hand. "Good evening, madam. I sent you for a charitable purpose. I have forbidden Adele to talk to me about her presence, and she is bursting with repletion. have the goodness to serve her as an auditress, an intercluse. It will be one of the most benevolent acts that you ever perform. Adele, indeed, no sooner saw Mrs. Fairfax than when she summoned her to the sofa, and there quickly filled her lap with the porcelain, the ivory, and the waxen contents of her bottée, pouring out meantime the explanations and the raptures in such broken English as if she was mistress of. Now, I have performed the part of a good host, pursued Mr. Rochester. I have put my guests into the way of amusing each other. I ought to be at a liberty to attend to my own pleasure. Miss Eyre, draw your chair still a little farther forward. You are yet too far back, and I cannot see you without disturbing my position in this most comfortable chair, which I have no mind to do. I did as I was bid, though I would not much rather have remained somewhat in the shade. But Mr. Rochester had such a direct way of giving orders that it seemed a matter of course to obey him promptly. We were, as I had said, in the dining room. The lustre which had been lit for dinner filled the room with a festal breath of light. The large fire was all red and clear. The purple curtains hung rich and ample before the lofty window, and loftier arch. Everything was still, save the subdued chat of Adele, and the filling of each pause and beating of winter rain against the panes. Mr. Rochester, as he sat in his damask-covered chair, looked different to what I had seen him look before. Not quite so stern, but much less gloomy. There was a smile on his lips, and his eyes sparkled, whether with wine or not, I am not sure. But I think it very probable. He was, in short, in his after-dinner mood, more expanded and genial, and also more self-indulgent than the frigid and rigid temper of the morning. Still, he looked preciously grim, cushioning his massive head against the swelling back of his chair, receiving the light of the fire on his granite-hewn features, and in his great dark eyes, for he had great dark eyes, and very fine eyes too, not without a certain change in their depth sometimes, which, if it was not softness, reminded you at least of that feeling. He had been looking 2 minutes at the fire, and I had been looking at the same length of time at him, when turning suddenly he caught my gaze fastened on his face. "You examine me, Miss Eyre," he said. "Do you think me handsome?" I should, if I had deliberated, and have replied to this question by something conventionally vague and polite, but the answer somehow slipped from my tongue before I was aware. "No, sir." "Ah, by word, there is something singular about you," he said. "You have the air of a little nonnette, quaint, quiet, grave, and simple as you sit with your hands before you, and your eyes generally bent to the carpet. And one asks you a question or makes a remark to which you are obliged to reply. You rap out a round rejoinder, which if not blunt, it is at least brusque. What did you mean by it?" "Sir, I was too plain. I do beg your pardon. I ought to have replied that it was not easy to give an impromptu answer to a question about appearances, that tastes mostly differ, and that beauty is of little consequence, or something of that sort." "You ought to have replied no such thing. Beauty is of little consequence indeed. And so, under the pretense of softening the previous outrage, of stroking and soothing me into placidity, you stick a sly penknife under my ear. Go on. What fault do you find with me, pray? Suppose that I have all my limbs and all my features like any other man." "Mr. Rochester, allow me to disown my first answer. I intended no pointed repartee. It was only a blunder." "Just so. I think so. And you shall be answerable for it. Criticize me. Does my forehead not please you?" He lifted up the sable waves of hair which lay horizontally over his brow, and showed a solid enough mass of intellectual organs, but an abrupt deficiency where the suave sign of benevolence should have risen. "Now, ma'am, am I a fool?" "Far from it, sir. You would perhaps think me rude if I inquired in return whether you are a philanthropist." There again, another stick of the penknife. Oh, when she pretended to pat my head, and now it is because that I said that I did not like the society of children and old women. No, young lady, I am not a general philanthropist, but I bear a conscience. And then he pointed to the prominences which are said to indicate that faculty, and which, fortunately for him, were sufficiently conspicuous, and giving, indeed, a marked breadth to the upper part of his head. And besides, I once had a kind of rude tenderness of heart. When I was as old as you, I was once a feeling fellow enough, partial to the unfledged, unfostered, and the unlucky. But fortune had knocked me about since. She has even kneaded me with her knuckles, and now, I flatter myself, I am hard and tough as an Indian rubber ball, pervious, though, through a chink or two still, and with one sentiment point in the middle of the lump. Yes, does that leave hope for me? Hope of what, sir? Of my final retransformation from India rubber back to flesh. And then I thought to myself that he had way too much wine, and I did not know what answer to make of his queer question. How could I tell whether he was capable of being retransformed? "Ah, you look very puzzled, Miss Eyre, and though you are not pretty any more than I am handsome, yet a puzzled air becomes you. Besides, it is convenient, for it keeps those searching eyes of yours away from my physiognomy, and busies them with the worsted flowers of the rug. So puzzle on. Young lady, I am disposed to be gregarious and communicative tonight." With this announcement he rose from his chair and stood leaning his arm on the marble mantelpiece, and in that attitude his shape was plainly seen as well as his face. His unusual breadth of chest is almost disproportionate to the length of his limb. I am sure most people would have thought him an ugly man, yet there was so much unconscious pride in his port, so much ease in his demeanor, such a look of complete indifference to his own external appearance, so haughty a reliance on the power of other qualities, intrinsic or adventurous, to atone for the lack of a mere personal attractiveness, that in looking at him one inevitably shared the indifference, and even in a blind, imperfect sense, put faith in the confidence. "I am disposed to be gregarious and communicative tonight," he repeated, "and that is why I sent for you. The fire and the chandelier are not sufficient company for me, nor would Pilate have been, for none of these can talk. Adele is a degree better, but still far below the mark, and Mrs. Fairfax ditto. You, I am persuaded, can suit me if you will. You puzzled me the first evening that I invited you down here. I have almost forgotten you since. Other ideas have driven yours from my head. But tonight I am resolved to be at ease, to dismiss what importunes, that recall what pleases. It would please me now to draw you out, to learn more of you. Therefore, speak." Instead of speaking, I smiled, and not a very complacent or submissive smile either. "Speak," he urged. "About what, sir?" "Whatever you like. I leave both the choice of subject and the manner of treating it entirely to yourself." Accordingly, I sat and said nothing, and I thought to myself that if he expected me to talk for the mere sake of talking and showing off, then he will find that he has addressed himself to the wrong person. "You are dumb, Miss Eyre." I was dumb still. He bent his head a little towards me, and with a single hasty glance seemed to dive into my eyes. "Stubborn," he said. "And annoyed. Ah, it is consistent. I put my request in an absurd, almost insolent form. Miss Eyre, I beg your pardon. The fact is, Once for all, I don't wish to treat you like an inferior. That is, I claim only such superiority as must result from 20 years' difference in age and a century's advance in experience. This is legitimate, as Adele would say, and it is by virtue of the superiority, and by this alone, that I desire you to have the goodness to talk to me a little now, and divert my thoughts, which are galled with dwelling on one point, cankering as a rusty nail. He had deigned an explanation, almost an apology, and I did not feel insensible to his condescension, and would not seem so. I am willing to amuse you if I can, sir, quite willing, but I cannot introduce a topic because how do I know what will interest you? Ask me questions, and I will do my best to answer them. Then, in the first place, do you agree with me that I have a right to be a little masterful, abrupt, and perhaps exacting sometimes, on the grounds that I stated, namely, that I am old enough to be your father, and that I have battled through a varied experience with many men of many nations, and roamed over half the globe, while you have lived quietly with one set of people in one house? Do as you please, sir. That is no answer, or rather it is a very irritating answer, because it is a very evasive one. Reply clearly. I don't think so, sir. You have a right to command me merely because you are older than I, or because you have seen more of the world than I have. Your claim to superiority depends on the use that you have made of your time and experience. Promptly spoken. But I won't allow that, seeing that it would never suit my case, as I have made an indifference, not to say a bad, but use of both advantages. Leaving superiority out of the question, then, you must still agree to receive my orders now, and then, without being piqued or hurt by the tone of the command. Will you? I smiled and thought to myself that Mr. Rochester is peculiar. He seemed to forget that he pays me £30 per annum for receiving his orders. The smile is very well, he said, catching instantly the passing expression. But speak too. I was thinking, sir, that very few masters would trouble themselves to inquire whether or not their paid subordinates were piqued or hurt by their orders. Paid subordinates? What? You are my paid subordinate, are you? Oh, yes, I had forgotten the salary. Well, then, on that mercenary ground, will you agree to let me hector a little? No, sir, not on that ground, but on the ground that you did forget, and that you care whether or not a dependent is comfortable in his dependency. I agree heartily. And will you consent to dispense with a great many conventional forms and phrases, without thinking that omission arises from insolence? I am sure, sir, I should never mistake informality for insolence. One I rather like, and the other nothing free-born would submit to, even for a salary. Humbug! Most things free-born will submit to anything for a salary. Therefore keep to yourself, and don't venture on generalities of which you are intensely ignorant. However, I mentally shake hands with you for your answer, despite its inaccuracy, and much for the manner in which it was said. As for the substance of the speech, the manner was frank and sincere. One does not often see such a manner. No, on the contrary, affectation or coldness or stupid coarse-minded misapprehension of one's meaning are the usual rewards of candor. Not 3,000 raw school governesses would have answered me just as you have done. But I don't mean to flatter you. If you are cast into a different mold to the majority, it is of no merit of yours. Nature did this. And then, after all, I do go too fast in my conclusions. For what I yet know, you may be no better than the rest. You may have intolerable defects to counterbalance your few good points. And so may you, I thought to myself. My eye met his at the idea as it crossed my mind. He seemed to read the glance and answered me as if to import that had been spoken as well as imagined. Yes, you are right, he said. I have plenty faults of my own, and I know it. I don't wish to palliate them. I assure you, God need not to be too severe about others. I have a past existence, a series of deeds, a color of life to contemplate within my own breast, which might well call my sneers and censures from my neighbors to myself. I started, or rather, was thrust on to a wrong tack at the age of 21, and never recovered the right course since. But I might have been very different. I might have been as good as you, wiser, almost as stainless. I envy you, your peace of mind, your clean conscience, your unpolluted memory. Little girl, a memory without blot or contamination must be an exquisite treasure, an inexhaustible source of pure refreshment, is it not? How was your memory when you were 18, sir? It was all right then, limpid, salubrious. No gush of bilge water had turned it to a fetid puddle. I was your equal at 18, quite your equal. Nature meant me to be on the whole a good man, Miss Eyre, one of the better kind, and you see that I am not so. You would say that you don't see it, at least that I flatter myself as I read as much in your eye. Then take my word for it. I am not a villain. You are not to suppose that, not to attribute to me any such bad eminence, but owing that I verily believe rather to circumstances than to my natural bent. I am a trite, commonplace sinner, hackneyed in all the poor, petty disputations with which the rich and the worthless try to put on life. Do you wonder that I avow this to you? Know that in the course of your future life that you will often find yourself elected to the involuntary confidant of your acquaintances and their secrets. People will instinctively find out, as I have just done, that it is not your forte to tell of yourself, but to listen while others talk of themselves. They will feel, too, that you will listen with no malevolence or scorn of their indiscretion, but with a kind of innate sympathy, not the less comforting and encouraging because it is very unobtrusive in its manifestations. How do you know? How can you guess all of this, sir? I know it well. Therefore I proceed almost as freely as if I were writing my thoughts in a diary. You would say that I should have been a superior to circumstances. So should I. But you see, I was not. When fate wronged me, I had not the wisdom to remain cool. I turned desperate. Then I degenerated. Now, when my vicious simpleton excites my disgust by his paltry ribaldry, I cannot flatter myself that I am better than he. I am forced to confess that he and I are on a level. I wish I had stood firm. God knows that I do. Dread remorse when you are tempted to err, Miss Eyre. Remorse is the poison of life. Repentance is said to be its cure, sir. It is not its cure. Reformation may be its cure, and I could be reform. I have strength yet for that, if. But where is the use of thinking it, hampered and burdened and cursed as I am? Besides, since happiness is irrevocably denied me, I have a right to get pleasure out of life, and I will get it, cost what it may. Then it will degenerate you more, sir. Possibly. Yet why should I, if I cannot get Possibly. Yet why should I, if I cannot get sweet, fresh pleasure? And I may get it as sweet and fresh as the wild honey the bee gathers on the moor. It will sting, and it will taste bitter, sir. How do you know? You've never tried it. How very serious, how very solemn you look. And you are as ignorant of the matter as this cameo head, taking a thing from the mantelpiece. You have no right to preach to me, you neophyte, that you have not passed the porch of life and are absolutely unacquainted with its miseries. and its mysteries. I only remind you of your own words, sir. You said error brought remorse, and you pronounced remorse the poison of existence. And who talks of error now? I scarcely think the notion that flitted across my brain was an error. I believe that it was an inspiration rather than a temptation. It was very genial, very soothing. I know that. Here it comes again. It is no devil, I assure you, or if it be, it has put on the robes of an angel of light. I think that I must admit so fair a guest when it asks entrance to my heart. Distrust it, sir. It is not a true angel. Once more, how do you know? By what instinct do you pretend to distinguish between a fallen seraph of the abyss and a messenger from the eternal throne, between a guide and a seducer? I judged by your countenance, sir, which has troubled you when you said the suggestion had returned upon you. I feel sure it will work more misery if you do not listen to it. Not at all. It bears the most gracious message in the world. For the rest, you are not my conscience-keeper, so don't make yourself uneasy. Here, come in, bonny wanderer. He said this as if he spoke to a vision, viewless to any eye but his own. Then, folding his arms, which he had half extended on his chest, he seemed to enclose in their embrace and the invisible being. Now, he continued, again addressing me, I have received the pilgrim, a disguised deity, as I verily believe. Already it has gone and done me good. My heart was sort of a charnel, and it will now be a shrine. To speak truth, sir, I don't understand you at all. I cannot keep up the conversation because I'm afraid it has gotten out of my depth, and the one thing that I do know is that you said you were not as good as you would like to be, and that you regretted your own imperfection. One thing that I can comprehend is that you intimated that you may have had a sullied memory, which was a perpetual bane. It seems to me that if you tried hard, you would in time find it possible to become what you yourself would approve, and that if from this day you began with resolution to correct your thoughts and actions, you would in a few years have laid up with a new and stainless store of recollections, to which you might revert with pleasure. Ah, justly thought, and rightly said, Miss Eyre, and at this moment I am paving hell with energy. Sir? I am laying down good intentions, which I believe durable as flint. Certainly my associates in pursuance shall be other than they have been. And better? And better. So much better as pure ore than foul dross. You seem to doubt me. I don't doubt myself. I know what my aim is, and I know what my motivations are, and at this moment I pass a law, unalterable, as that of the Medes and the Persians, that both are right. They cannot be, sir, if they require a new statute to legalize them. They are, Miss Eyre, though they absolutely require a new statute. Unheard of combinations of circumstances demand unheard of rules. That sounds a dangerous maxim, sir, because one can see at once that is liable to abuse. Ah, sententious sage, it is so, but I swear by my household gods not to be abusive of it. You are also human and fallible. I am, and so are you. What then? The human and the fallible shall not arrogate a power which the divine and the perfect alone can be safely entrusted. What power? That of saying that any strange, unsanctioned line of action, that let it be right. Let it be right, the very words that you have pronounced them. Well, may it be right then, I said as I rose, and deeming it useless to continue a discourse which was all darkness to me, and besides, sensible that the character of my interlocutor was beyond my penetration, at least beyond its present reach, and feeling the uncertainty, the vague sense of insecurity, which accompanies a conviction of ignorance. Where are you going? To put Adele to bed. It is past her bedtime. Ah, so you are afraid of me because I talk like a sphinx. Your language is enigmatical, sir. But though I am bewildered, I am certainly not afraid. But you are afraid. Your self-love dreads a blunder. In that sense, I do feel apprehensive. I wish to talk nonsense. If you did, it would be such a grave, a quiet manner. I should mistake it for sense. Do you never laugh, Miss Eyre? No, don't trouble yourself to answer. I see that you laugh rarely, but you can laugh very merrily, believe me. You are just not naturally austere, any more than I am naturally vicious. The Lowood constraint still clings to you somewhat, controlling your features and muffling your voice, the restricting of your limbs, and you fear in the presence of a man and a brother or a father or master or what you will to smile too gaily, to speak too freely, or move too quickly. But in time I think you will learn to be natural with me, as I find it impossible to be conventional with you. And then your looks and movements will have more vivacity and variety than they dare offer now. I see at intervals the glance of a curious sort of bird through the close-set bars of a cage. A vivid, restless, resolute captive is in there. Were it but free, it would soar cloud-high. You are still bent on going? It has struck 9, sir. Never mind. Wait a minute. Adele is not ready to go to bed yet. My position, Miss Eyre, is with my back to the fire, and my face to the room, and it favors observation. While talking to you, I have also occasionally watched Adele. She pulled out of her box about 10 minutes ago a little pink silk frock. Rapture lit with her face as she unfolded it. Its coquetry runs in its blood, blends with her brains, and seasons the marrow of her bones. And then she cried with such exultation and excitement, and then she rushed out of the room. She is now with Sophie, undergoing a robing process, and in a few minutes that she will re-enter, and I know that I shall see a miniature of Céline Vance, as she used to appear on the boards of the rising of— Oh, but never mind that. However, my tenderest feelings are now about to receive a shock, such as my presentiment. Stay now to see whether it will be realized. Ere long, Adele's little foot was heard tripping across the hall. She entered and transformed as her guardian had predicted. A dress of rose-colored satin, very short and as full in the skirt as it could be gathered, replaced the brown frock that she had previously worn. A wreath of rosebuds circled her forehead, and her feet were dressed in silk stockings and small white satin sandals. Est-ce que mon bon mirror va bien? She cried, bounding forward. Et mon soleil et mas bas, tenez je crois que je vais danser. And then, spreading out her dress, she chassed across the room, still, and having reached Mr. Rochester, she wheeled lightly around him before on tiptoe, then dropped on one knee at his feet, and exclaimed, Monsieur, je fois me remercie 1000 fois de votre bonté. Then, rising, she added, C'est comme cela que maman forcée, n'est-ce pas, monsieur? Precisely, was the answer, and comment cela? She charmed by my English gold out of my British breeches pocket. I have been green too, Miss Eyre. Aye, grass green. Not a more vernal tint freshens you now than once freshened me. My spring is gone, however, but it has left me that French floweret, and on my hands which in some moods I would fain to be rid of, but not valuing now the root whence it sprang, having found that it was of a sort of which nothing could gold dust more manure. I have but a half liking to the blossom, especially when it looks so artificial as just now. I keep it and rear it rather on the Roman Catholic principle of expiating numerous sins, great or small, by one good work. I'll explain all this some day. Good night. Whew. Well, with that being said, I'm going to call it because the next chapter is quite large and quite hefty. So if you enjoyed listening to me read Jane Eyre, please feel free to like, subscribe, or follow. I do stream pretty regularly, and I will be streaming again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for the next reading of Jane Eyre. So please feel free to come join me, and I do hope to see you next time. And with that being said, I hope you all stay safe and stay geeky as always.